While salmon were introduced to New Zealand over 100 years ago for sport, salmon farms have only been established for the past 30 years. New Zealand king salmon farms just over 5 surface hectares at a time across its current sites in the Marlborough Sounds. It produces annual sales in excess of $115 million. They're currently trying to expand their farming operations.
New Zealand king salmon was born from 2 companies in the mid-90s, Southern Ocean and Regal Salmon. We produce about 7,500 tonnes of premium king salmon. New Zealand's actually quite unique around the world. The only salmon we grow here is king salmon. Most of the world grows the commodity Atlantic salmon. King salmon is the largest of the salmon species. It has lots of oil in the flesh, so it's all those heart-healthy, really good omega-3 oils. It's really good for people. It's full of flavour, so it's very, very flavoursome compared to the Atlantic salmon. So it's beautiful taste. Chefs around the world really aspire to have Ora King on their menu. 50% of our product is sold locally, the other half is exported. Our main markets are the US, Japan and Australia. We're worth $55 million to New Zealand, and the Coriolis report, which was conducted late last year, they were showing that salmon is the #1 growing export earner in New Zealand. New Zealand king salmon has got 3 freshwater hatcheries. We raise the smolt there for about 6 to 12 months, and we transfer them to one of our 5 seawater sites at about 100 grams. Once we put the fish into seawater, they're grown for about 12 to 18 months through to harvest. This is the harvest operation. We've corralled up a group of fish in this net here, and what we do is we gently move them around here into this blue canvas bag here, and we apply a herbal anaesthetic based on clove oil, and that anaesthetises the fish. Once the fish are anaesthetised, we can move them through here to the barge, where they're killed with a percussive blow to the head. They're bled, and then they're packed on an ice slurry and sent into Nelson for processing tonight. We harvest about 30 tonne of fish a day. That equates to about 5,000 to 8,000 fish. The fish are about 4 kilos when we harvest them, and they're probably about anywhere between 12 and 18 months old. Once we pack them on ice, the barge will take those fish into Picton, and then they're transferred to a truck and carried over to our factory over in Nelson. That whole process probably takes about 3 to 4 hours. We make sure that every fish that we harvest today is specific to a customer's requirements, so they'll get those fish, as early as tomorrow. Salmon normally feed morning and night. When they're small, we feed them 5 meals a day. Their stomachs are still very small, so they only take a few pellets. And as they get older, we wean them onto less and less meals a day. So probably by the time they're harvested, they'll be down to 1 to 2 meals a day.
I'm currently feeding fish. I'm feeding a pen, and what I'm looking for here is to ensure that the fish are fed to cetacean. I'm watching the fish response. We've got a surface camera and an in-water camera at 5 metres, and I'm monitoring the fish, how they're behaving. You can tell when they're getting close to being full, and also you're watching for pellets to come past the camera. It's a good indicator, and it's just basically ensuring there's no wastage. The feeding itself's all run by computer, and the operator is, controlling what pen gets fed, the times, the rate that the pellets are going out to the pens.
In the salmon food, we've got protein, we've got oil and carbohydrates. We've got a vitamin pack that goes in there, also which contains astaxanthin, which is an antioxidant, which is critical for salmon health and well-being. It also gives the salmon that lovely pink colour that you can see. New Zealand king salmon food is imported from either Australia or Chile. That's where the feed mills are set up. We could set up a feed mill in New Zealand, but the industry's not really big enough to sustain one, so that's why we have to import the food. We use about 15,000 tonnes of food a year. Salmon are really, really efficient converters of feed, so it only takes 2 kilos of food to get a kilo of weight gain. The local market has grown significantly. So New Zealand is consuming a little bit less than 2 kilos of salmon per capita at the moment, but there's a lot of room to grow. When you look at the Asian countries like Japan, some of the Scandinavian countries, they're eating much, much more salmon per head. So there's a lot of room for growth in New Zealand. We want to replicate the wild, so we spawn the fish in freshwater, obviously transferring them through to seawater. And one of the key things is making sure that we're providing good water flows to keep the nets nice and clean. We want to keep predators away from the nets. We overcome the predator problem by putting a big predator net around the farm. And what we have to do is we have to constantly maintain and monitor that net. Basically, it's under the water, it's a dynamic environment down there, and it can sometimes tear. If there's a hole there, we have to beat the seal finding that hole. So once we find those holes, mend them up and keep the seals out. And the predator nets have been really effective, which has been really pleasing. They're not 100% effective, but they are very, very effective. New Zealand King Salmon employs about 420 people. Most of those are over in the factory, in the processing plant over in Nelson, sort of 250 people there. Aquaculture employs about 120 people, of which 70 are Marlborough based.
You are most likely to see up to 30 different species at a time.
Okay.
So you have to get used to seeing different species and be able to identify different species at one time.
Really important that we've got a skilled workforce. Most of our people go through our basic training, so we link in with the ITOs and we provide sort of level 2 and 3 and 4 training to our team members. So it's all based on the job training, so things like water blasting, our diving's all ITO related, our fish handling, fish feeding, and pretty much everything's wrapped up in ITO training. And the key there is about getting consistency across the operation. Our main environmental impacts are visual impacts, noise impacts, and then some of our discharge impacts. We want to manage all those. So our visual impacts, we manage those. We're a good neighbour. We talk to the people around us. On the Clay Point farm there, that's one of our newer farms. We've just started to instigate black netting, and that is more neutral, so it blends in with the environment a lot more. We've started to go for looking at lower profile barging. With noise, we use sound attenuated machinery. So we've got good muffling systems now on our engines, that sort of thing. And that's been brought up with neighbours, and we've worked with them to make that work. With the environmental discharges, it's the fish faeces that is the issue that needs to be managed. Fish faeces drops beneath the salmon farm. We've got the worms there that are assimilating those faeces. And what we do, or part of our resource consent, is we've got an independent science advisor that comes in. They monitor what's happening underneath our farm. That's reported back to council, and council ensure that we stay within our consented conditions. Last year we applied through the EPA process to the Board of Inquiry for 9 more sites. We've had 4 granted so far. They've been appealed by Save Our Sounds and EDS. But essentially those sites have been granted. That's great. That can take us through to probably about somewhere between about 12,000 tonnes. But we do need more. We do need more water space. We need to grow our volume to supply those premium markets that are growing all the time.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.